Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Off Air podcast. Of course, we're here to do our monthly review following Maidstone United in the National League and surrounding cup competitions. And of course, we've got again another up and down month following the Stones with some cup success in quite a grand way, of course, which we'll be covering, but also not so successful in the National League. Somewhat the story of our season. But with me today to discuss all of that and a little bit more is, of course, Sean Skirt, channel regular. Welcome, Sean.
Hello.
And Nigel Seeger, of course. Hello, Nigel. How you doing?
Hello.
So, of course, it has been a pretty short month in terms of games. There's not been as many as we saw, I think, in January. I do believe we had quite a few last month to keep us busy, so it should be a little bit shorter today. But just before we get into it, I do want to say we have got Manchester United versus West Ham on in the background. So if there's any goals going for West Ham, me and Sean will be celebrating Nigel's misery as a Manchester United fan down there. So yes, bear with us if there's any sudden exclamations at any point in this podcast. But to kick things off, of course, the month of February, we did go on the very long away day down to Yeovil. And of course, we, well, in my opinion at least, played the best we've played this season and one of the worst halves we've played this season. It was a very much Jekyll and Hyde performance. We did come out of that game with a point, 2-2 in the end, through a late equaliser via Jerome Binnon Williams. Of course, in that first half, absolutely fantastic play, in my opinion. Probably the best half we've seen from the likes of Shamar Lawson this season. It was absolutely sensational, the performance that he put in, especially on that left wing, a place he's not too common at playing with this season. He played really well there and just carried this team forward, something we've not seen too much of. We took the game to Yeovil. Of course, not doing so well at the moment, but their form wasn't necessarily as bad as ours going into that game. So I think the expectation was still on them at the time. And Maidstone really came to Hewish Park and gave them a game. So yeah, I was really happy with that. Second half, they made some changes, and I think the tactical inexperience of the managerial team probably came to light a little bit. They did bring on a big striker, and he did, at the time, bag 2 goals. Retrospectively, did only get one of them, as it was nowhere near him for the first goal. But yes, it was a good game from Maidstone against a team who at the time were a lot better than us. And I was very happy with that performance. Of course, been on getting on team on the score sheet as well as the team sheet, of course. But yeah, I was just really happy with that in general. Showed a good bit of spirit to be able to come back, going 1-0 up, going 2-1 down, and then of course a very late equaliser from Binom. Nice to see him bagging a header from a set piece as well, something we've not been too fruitful from this season. So yeah, I think it was a pretty decent start to the month, coming off the back of a loss against Torquay on the road as well. So yeah, I mean, that kind of gave us something to build on going into the cup game versus Eastleigh. Now, this is of course the big talking point for the month, probably the season now going forward, as our hopes, as recent games aren't looking too prosperous. We did end up beating Eastleigh 4-0 in the cup at their own backyard. So, Nigel, what a game that was. I mean, talk us through it. At the time, we couldn't believe it, could we? It was a really strange game, but one which I think we'll look back on very fondly come the end of the season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you and I did the commentary for that one, and I remember, we were talking about our expectations for the game, and I do remember saying on there, oh, it'd be good if we're 3-4 nil up come the last 10 or so minutes, so that we can bring the likes of Solwan, Joe Smith, and that on to give them a bit of experience. And I don't think in our wildest dreams we ever sort of one of our predictions would
It's a
actually
funny
come
old
true,
game,
but
is it? Strange
it
one.
was it. I mean, it was one of those performances as well that everything just fell for us, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think George said in the end of his Torquay video that that a big win was coming, but you kind of put that down to manager talk, don't you? And they're going to big it up, and as we said before, George is quite a positive person, so you know, but it did. Everything just came together. We got an early goal, and then we didn't just sit back. We built upon that as well. So we was 2-0 up within the first 10 minutes, and then one of their players, got two yellow cards in quick succession in I think it was the 23rd, 24th minute, something like that. And Aaron Martin, it was, wasn't it? Their captain got
The
sent off,
captain, yeah.
and from that point on, really, there wasn't no way back for them. We controlled the game, and as you said, Shamal Lawson continued to impress in that game. Alabi had probably one of his better games of the season
Absolutely, yeah.
to date. He was very influential. He was holding the ball up, and it just everything that we tried came off that day. And in the end, towards the end, we was in cruise control, I think, really. And
Hmm.
it was a lot of what showboating, but it was just just everything we tried came off. And then Sol got on towards the end and had a good run out, and Christie, which got proved to be one of his last games, got an assist, I think, in that game as well. So it was just one of those performances that you kind of think, yeah, it's you can see the plan that the management team have put in place. It just all came together that day, and we hoped that it would kick us on, but it did, I suppose, in some kind of respect, because it, like we said, it keeps the season going, doesn't it?
Hmm.
There's a lot of the other teams that are down the bottom with us, apart from Gateshead, are out of the trophy. So, and we've seen what that sort of kit does to Gateshead. They've picked up since and managed to get themselves out of the relegation zone. So, it's all positive. It's just everything that was good, and what the players do, and what we know they can do. It just all came together on the day, and it proved in the result.
Absolutely. And if you weren't aware, speaking of Gateshead getting out of the relegation zone, for anybody listening, they did
Yeah,
obviously get a point deducted today for fielding an ineligible player in the league at some point. Was there another team as well? Was that in a different? I think it was in the south, wasn't it? Yeah,
well
when
in
in
the
the
south.
south. So yeah, not too important that one, but yeah, Gateshead dropping a point. Perhaps if other results had gone our way, that might have been even greater news for us. But I think they will just slip back into relegation by a point, just below Dorking, because of that decision. But it's a shame, we can't confirm who it was against, and we can't hope for a magical 3 points to come our way if that was how it worked. If they fielded their ineligible player in our draw that we'll get onto in the last week of Feb, then yeah, you never know. We could have picked up a sneaky 3 points if that's how it worked. But unfortunately, not. It does seem. But Sean, continuing on with Eastleigh, of course, you are someone who has championed cup competitions, specifically the FA Cup. Due to financial reasons, not a whole lot of money in in the trophy. Let's be honest, it is very small rewards, really, considering the amount of effort you have to put in to win it. However, it does result in a trip to Wembley come the end of the competition, and it does, of course, provide hope for the fans. So, for yourself, what is it that a cup run will bring to us this season? Obviously, we haven't been to Wembley as a fan base, or at least I don't believe we have. And if we have, it's not been for a very, very long time. So, yeah, what is it for you that a cup run would do for Maidstone this season, considering the league position we're in?
Yeah, I mean, we've said it for most of the season. We've been going, oh, some good running, good form in the cup might replicate in the league, and clearly with the runs we've had, I mean, it's 14 without a win in the league at the moment. We had a 13-game winless run in the league, um, September, October time. So in terms of what it means, what it does is quite simply, it's hope for next season because you can turn some performances around once we're mathematically relegated, for example, and we might well start to do that in the second half of April when it's probably mathematically done. But yeah, a trip to Wembley, again, something that's never been done. We won that league title last season, for example, and that was something that hadn't been done for a while. or only one of the very few occasions that we've ever managed to do it. So to get a trip to Wembley, despite a bad season, I've said it, so often about other teams I have a team that I follow. And it's the same for Maidstone. If you have a bad season in the league, I don't think many people are going to mind getting a trip to Wembley if it costs you a position in your league, because how often do you get a day out to Wembley? I think when I did the Newcastle look at things for the cup final we've had just at the weekend, I think the last time that we'd won something, I think 14 of the other 19 Premier League sides have won something in between times, and only 5 have never won something, but 2 or 3 of them have, I think all of them have been to Wembley as well. So at that level, getting to Wembley is still quite remote. So when it comes to a non-league perspective, you've got your vase and your trophy, and that's it. Because, the FA Cup, to get anywhere near Wembley, it's got to be miracles. I think it's quarterfinals is probably the best non-league's ever done in the last 120 years. Probably there might have been some non-league in the 1890s. Don't quote me on that, but that's when it's likely to have happened. But certainly it was a century between Lincoln and whoever else it was before to reach the quarterfinals. So it's just, it's a bit of pride as well, in the management team, in the staff, throughout the club, whatever is going on at each level. And it would bring, it would be, probably a nice ribbon, a nice bow on a very mouldy apple of a season, I would have thought. It's nicely presentable at the end, but at the core of it, you're still going, oh, that's horrible. But a lovely presentation basket that it's come in, at least, which would be a trip to Wembley. That would be just unreal from a Maidstone perspective, because, however long this club has been going for, you could double that time frame and you think, will we get another go at Wembley? If we're established in the Football League for longer, is there a Football League trophy final that we could get to, something along those lines? That for me is all it's about. It's about pride and ending the season on a high. It's going to be interesting if we do get there, because obviously you have a 3-week gap between the end of the league season and then the final. I know, obviously, for a few sides in recent years, the season's ended for them and then they've had the FA Trophy final. I mean, even Concord probably had about 18 months to wait to play their final because of COVID, for example, when they got to that one. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we get on the rest of the season in the competition. A fantastic win at Eastleigh, showing the potential of the players that we've got, and pretty much the goal of the season competition in that one match, frankly. The liquid football came to the fore once more.
It came back. It did come back. Of
course, and rightly so. It's the closest we've ever been to Wembley as well, which I know is a point I made sure you guys got on air whilst you were on air, of course, saying because the semi-final would be a one-off affair, it's always been two-legged until COVID hit. Then we have one match in the quarterfinals and a second match potentially if we get there in the semi-final, and then that's it. It's 2 90-minute matches plus penalties away from getting to a Wembley final. We have never, ever in our history, in both forms, ever been closer. So it's the fact that it's that tantalisingly close. We could not win a single game in the league for the rest of the season, but you could genuinely see Maidstone winning 2/3 matches and somehow get to Wembley. 10,000-15,000 people from the county town going to FA, the FA non-league finals day, would be quite something. And again, it would just be the ironic bow on that hoopy apple presentation box. Honestly, that's just how I feel it would be. Just the ultimate irony. There's quite a few clubs have done it before. Birmingham won the League Cup, got relegated. Wigan won the FA Cup and got relegated. Let's add Maidstone to that infamous list of places that have done something like that.
Yeah, it certainly would. It certainly would be a spectacle, wouldn't it? As you say, we can always come back to the National League. Of course, there's no guarantee of it, but the chances of that are a hell of a lot more likely than getting to a final at Wembley, of course. And just if anyone's interested, if you're in my FPL league that I did tweet at the start of the season, put on Facebook. I'm actually highest in the world at the moment on Fantasy League for this week, 112 points. Next highest 106. So, what can I say? My football knowledge is just so good that you are definitely getting the most out of it listening to this podcast. So, irony aside,
sort of thing I can take you to Wembley, Joe. Sort of thing.
irony aside, we will move on very swiftly to the Oldham game. Of course, something which did not go as well as planned. Of course, we did lose that game 2-0. Unfortunately, I just kind of kept out of it, really. It was a bit of a downer coming off the back of that Eastleigh result. I was expecting a result minimum draw against Oldham, to be honest, coming off the back of the Eastleigh game. That might be quite silly of me, quite naive to have got into that cup hope spirit. But as Sean mentioned a couple minutes ago, that league form has not really picked up off the back of this cup run we're on. However, we did play Oldham at Boundary Park. And yeah, commentating that one was a tough one. It was just very, very quiet for Maidstone, very stale at times. We did see Mark Marshall feature, someone who I'm quite happy we've brought in. You probably would have seen the Mark Marshall All You Need to Know video by the time this podcast does go out. Yeah, he's someone who I think can contribute quite a lot to this Maidstone team if we were to retain him for next season, which would be nice. But yeah, apart from that, really not too much to take from the game. I think, looking at Oldham's form since the new ownership and things like that, it wasn't really something we could have, it's definitely not guaranteed points. No game is guaranteed points for Maidstone in this season, but certainly one which I think we would have been more hopeful for. And again, could have led us on to a better end to the month, really. I mean, we've all mentioned in previous podcasts that February was the month that had to be where we picked up the points, and we haven't. And looking at the rest of the season running, I almost shed a tear yesterday. Looking at the fixtures we've got for the rest of the season, I think we've got all bar one playoff side. And yeah, the rest isn't looking too tasty either. So, yeah, a cup run, of course, it may have to be for us. But yeah, Oldham, not too much to say about that one, really. They took their chances. It was a very low quality affair from either side. And it was just about as miserable as the weather. So, on to Eastleigh, a league fixture, which Sean, if you could just give us a little rundown on that one. Obviously not quite as successful as the cup fixture just a week or so before, but
Yeah, that's right. It was not as bad as the Oldham game was, and fairly tight first half, all being told. Not too many chances for either side, but it was McKinnon that got that goal right on half time. Barden tried to come out for it, didn't win it cleanly, and looped into the net. So the usual disappointment at half time at the Gallagher. But Stone's come out largely the better side, probably for good 20-25 minutes of that second half. Barham got his equaliser, a lovely Andy Gray-esque diving header, poking that one home. And then it seemed to be a bit of, the same thing we've had most of this season, is some of the substitutions being a bit poorly timed. I know we made a substitution about 30 seconds or so before Whitehall basically received the ball in about 30-35 yards out, and he just absolutely lashed it home. No keeper in National League would have saved it. And I just think it's just something that Eastleigh clearly have managed to punish Maidstone for, with a brief change of setup and personnel, and worrying about where everybody's going to go, and not getting themselves in position ready for that Whitehall goal. Is a fairly similar situation for the third goal as well, that Scrimshaw scored. Just a lot of scrappy interplay in the box. And again, 2 or 3 substitutions got made after the Whitehall goal for both sides. And again, Maidstone a bit disorganised from the substitutions. And again, like we've seen for so much of the season, Maidstone playing well in patches, doing all right, but just certain times they're just not holding their own, lack of concentration. And then unfortunately, sloppy goals get conceded and get punished. So overall, much better performance than it was against Oldham. It's unfortunate that it's not a great performance for much longer in the grand scheme of things. But some good play, some good signs from a few players. Although, of course, that was it was good to see Sean Walters come back for a little bit. Sol started to get a few more minutes again. So overall, better, but still clearly not at the level that we need to start getting points in this month of February that I've been championing since probably about mid-June, probably whenever we got
as soon as the fixtures come out.
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely been a tough month, and I think this EC game kind of compounded that. Looks different class to when we played them in the cup. Obviously, that's not something that they'd necessarily valued all that highly. Maidstone clearly see that as a saving grace for this season. So maybe just different priorities in terms of how they wanted to see that one out. Of course, in the league, not too far from playoffs, so definitely an option for them should they continue to push on. But yeah, I mean, that Whitehall goal, I thought he was absolutely useless against us in the cup. I think Mamadou Job had him on toast all game, was really, terrorising him. Striker's nightmare. I thought he was absolutely excellent against him in the cup. And then that goal that he whipped out against us in the league fixture was just sensational. I mean, that really was a stunning goal. And sometimes in games like that, you don't take your chances. We've seen it all season. That's just what's going to happen. So yeah, not a fantastic one. Another lull, really, for the Stones. And then on to Gateshead. Gateshead, of course, another relegation candidate. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, have received a point deduction by 1 point. Nothing too much to write home about. But speaking of 1 point, they did earn 1 point against Maidstone at the Gallagher, Nigel. So tell us a little bit more about how this fixture panned out, Nigel.
Yeah, again, it kind of panned out how I expected it to pan out, really. I mean, I did the commentary with Connor, and we said in our sort of pre-game preview what our expectations were. And we said that it was two teams that were down the bottom. Obviously, at this stage of the season, you're down the bottom for a reason. So we know that Gateshead have picked up a little bit of form lately. But it was just two sides. It was a very scrappy game, really. And it was always going to come down to a mistake from either side. And so it proved. I mean, Fowler obviously conceded that an own goal. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way that it is with us at the moment. If you're down the bottom, all those sort of decisions go against you. And again, there was just little. It gets bitty, doesn't it? You get the referee not being consistent in decisions, and you can't get your game going. You can't get, he's either blowing up every couple of minutes or he's letting things go, and it's just so difficult to get anything from games like that. And so it proved. I mean, again, we came back. We was 1 goal down. We came back, got an early goal. It was basically the reverse of the Scunthorpe game, which we'll come on to, wasn't it? They went in front for a unfortunate goal, or good for them in that respect, and then we hit back straight away from the second half. And probably, to be fair, we was a team pushing towards the end, but I still don't think there was that urgency that, I mean, Eastleigh and Wrexham, games like that, well, we've played the top teams. We've actually, been throwing the kitchen sink at the game in the last 5 minutes to try and get something out of it. And I thought that at times there was, there wasn't that urgency there in the last 10 minutes to get something. And I think at that point, Gateshead were quite happy to get their point. They obviously were aware at half-time, would have been aware at half-time of the results, and there were quite a few teams down the bottom that were playing each other, so they knew that a point would probably get them out of the relegation zone. And I think they were quite happy with that in the end, and we just couldn't find that winner. So it's just it's not really good for us, is it? Because we know we need to get wins, but it's just not coming at the moment.
Yeah, I think in terms of, a game that's made me as miserable as possible. I think up until we scored that equalising goal against Gateshead, it was really tough to take. I mean, there was times in that game where we should have scored and we didn't. It's very frustrating at times. I was obviously, in the stands for that one, and it was just tough to take. It was really tough to take. It's just knowing that all these games that we saw as potential, point pickups and opportunities to maybe climb up a little bit more in that table, maybe try and claw something back from the league season, just kind of fading away, was obviously a little bit upsetting from a fan perspective. But of course, you did mention Scunthorpe as well, Nigel, and that is the next game we'll get onto. I don't believe I've allocated this one to anybody, but Sean, since you did commentate that one, we'll go with your opinion. I couldn't make this game. I was working. I did manage to get a little bit of a listening on yourself and Fred yesterday. So tell us how that one went.
Yeah, it was an interesting game. Maidstone, for a lot of the first half, were very much the better side, in my opinion. And it's one of two matches head-to-heads that we've got this season, did have for a potential double over a side. Maidenhead, the only one we've got next month, and then it will be a season without beating anyone twice, for stat fans there. But yeah, it was played like two sides who were fairly worried about their form, being fairly cagey, not getting much form between them. But there was a lot of action, end-to-end stuff. Clearly almost not very worried about what's going to happen come the end of the season. It was just sort of a lot of thrashing about. Barden had a good few saves, got down low to a Butterfield strike at one point. But then it was Bone with that strike that come out of nowhere just after the half hour. Kept a lot of possession. The ball was quite bitty at times, getting lost on numerous occasions. But Maidstone kept it, played it well down the right hand flank and ball into Bone, and just a huge, huge deflection that took Chapman completely out of the game. And from then on, basically, Scunthorpe carrying on, controlling a lot of the play, as they had done for a lot of the first half. Going in with a rare 1-0 lead, Maidstone, at the Gallagher, or a rare half-time lead anyway. I think it's the sixth half-time lead we'd had in the league, and I think we'd drawn 1-1, and lost 3. So that then became a second draw, obviously, because at the start of the second half, straight out of the trap, Sembi Ferris down the right-hand side, and he's pulled the ball back to Butterfield. And at the time when we watched it go in, we saw Barden just basically fall back over on his backside, and the ball's gone nowhere near him, and it's just trickled across his front. And just watching some replays in the last few minutes to remind myself of it, and seeing that it seems as though Barden, has had an issue. He's had issues before with obviously the Eastleigh home game with a punch where he's not come to get it. There's the York goal, when everyone was on the other side seeing that one, and not great for ultimately their winner on that afternoon. But it just seems like the way he's shaped up, because it's with his right foot. I think he's thinking he's going to bend it in at the near post. It's clearly been just passed into the far post for someone to maybe get a touch on, and no one else is near it. And again, Barden's just ended up on his backside rather than taking the choice, seemingly going to the near. It's gone the opposite way, and he's just fallen in the middle. So a couple of goalkeeping mistakes. Harsh to call that for Chapman's one because of the deflection, but hard not to blame Barden for that equaliser last night. Also, just not defending the space well for that goal that Butterfield scored. But in retrospect, I would probably say that if anybody deserved to score a goal last night for Scunthorpe, it was Butterfield, because he was, as Connor did mention
Spreading the
to me,
Butterfield.
spreading the play, which I genuinely had. I punt as much as I can,
If you couldn't
but
tell.
indeed, but I genuinely had no idea about that one, so I was pleased with that. So yeah, it was just scrappy chances after that, and again, it really opened up even more in the second half. It was more controlled by Scunthorpe in the first half, and sort of the 5 minutes we had for our goal, we earned it in that moment. I didn't think we deserved to be ahead by then, and then just the whole of the second half was just pinball end to end. A couple of substitutions from either side that sort of, certainly from Maidstone, we brought Bivesh on for Sol for the last 10 minutes, and you sort of thought, okay, that's us setting our stall out for a point. Because no offense to Bivesh, obviously got his goal against Aldershot. Great to see him come back from his loan. Obviously, all those things we'll talk about shortly in the video. But yeah, just you've got Nathan Jetche on the bench. You've got a striker on there. Get those extra 2 points. Gateshead lose that point. Without that, you're looking at a 9-10 point gap. With all those factors coming into play, you're looking at, say, 6-7 point gap between us and safety.
Yeah.
So, it was the same with Gateshead. 3 points would have been valuable. They're absolutely miraculous against Scunthorpe last night if we get them in terms of our escape. So I've said before, off air and on here, February was going to be crucial. We needed at least 4 points in those last two games. It's too few for me. And yeah, I think the best way to put it is, as you've said, Joe, let's look forward to the FA Trophy on the 11th. I think it's probably the way I'm going to sum up our league season at present.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Of course, not a great deal in terms of league form to write home about. 3 draws and 2 losses. So, I mean, it's not our worst month, of course. But again, like you said, there's a couple points too little, really, I think, for many of us. I think at least 6 to 8 points was probably what we needed if we needed any kind of hope going into March. So that is all the games for February wrapped up. And of course, now that's going to lead us on to where we dissect the other ongoings, typically off the field, a few on the field as well. And the first thing we're going to start off with, of course, is transfers. We've seen a few comings out of the team. We've seen a few coming into the team. And of course, we did lose a couple of weeks back, Chrissy Patterson and Hadi Gandor as well. Both players who did feature at some pretty important times for us last season. Gandor not as much, more on the fringes of the squad, but of course scored in a memorable game for the Stones last season. Christie probably scored, well, contributed to a goal in the most memorable game I've ever been to in my life. Sean, of course, Tonto, St Albans, the rest. But yeah, I mean, Christie leaving for me was a bit of a surprise. Didn't really see that one coming. We've since seen Josh Shonibare come in, Mark Marshall come in. Both players who, if like I mentioned, if you haven't already, go and watch the All You Need to Know videos. They'll be out by the time you see this. Both good players with decent backgrounds that can definitely contribute to this team. But just for everything Christie did last season, I'm so grateful for. Really, really changed games for us at really crucial times last season. Did some fantastic things for us, of course. St Albans, Concord, just 2 games for me, which really, really stand out. So I'm very thankful to him. Gandor as well, a loyal servant, of course, did return after being on loan last season. So, he definitely felt like he had a place here at the club. Unfortunately, this season with injury and things like that, just didn't quite work out for him. So, yeah, I mean, Sean, coming on to you, I think you'll probably have something to say about Christie for his contributions to some cult classics, but is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I'll obviously echo what you've said there. because I've always said that he's got a heart of gold. He's a great guy. Some of the performances he's put in when he'd lost a loved one, a day or two beforehand, and he still put in a brilliant performance earlier on this season from memory. All the contributions to Tonto and everything else. I've said this season that he can really kick on, and first couple of months he did heed that advice, those words. He was really kicking on, and getting himself involved in games. He probably the joint most influential player probably for August September contribution he made. The header he got against Dorking. That game could have gone differently if we'd have kept on top of that against Dorking, which obviously is something we just don't do against Dorking. That's just not how we do it. So he's hoping we get a chance to rectify that next season.
Indeed.
And for Hayley, the couple of goals he scored, in that April, just clinching things when others were getting the jitters. He scored that very important goal right at the end of the month, and pretty much secured the title on that afternoon at the end of April. Both in club folklore for their contributions. And again, Christie has just got so much ability. But for the pair of them, for personal reasons, wanting to go get game time elsewhere, model professionals, good on them for doing that, because not everybody's content with sitting on the bench. But to be honest, with Maidstone and the injury list we've had, I don't think there have been too many players who have been able to coast it and sit on the bench this season, because they've either been injured or playing or somewhere in between. There's very few and far in between in that area. So, to the pair of them, completely understandable, but always sad that these things don't always work out.
Yeah, for sure. And Nigel, is there anything else you wanted to just add on to the end there? I think me and Sean just about wrapped it up. Sorry about that, but
yeah, you have. Obviously we know what an influence he had not only this season but last season. He comes off the bench and he does make a difference, and that's what you want from your substitute player, somebody that comes and makes a difference, and he's done that and proved that. And I mean, talking about the highlight games as well, obviously we've mentioned them, but the first commentary and the first game of the last season, the Hemel Hempstead, he came off the bench and scored the fourth goal there, of course. So, and also just a little fact, he's shares the same birthday as me, so somebody that's
be sad to see him go.
just for that. But good luck to him. I mean, I think he'll do well. He's at Welling at the moment, isn't he? Whether that's just till the end of the season or whether that's a view to a long-term contract. But he's definitely good enough for that level. So good luck to him, and he'll always be remembered as a champion at Maidstone. And not many players can say that, can they?
Absolutely not.
Also
Sean.
to point out, the same way we don't know about Gateshead and what point for an ineligible player, we also don't have it confirmed that Christie may well have been the ineligible player.
No, I think they did. They did confirm the Welling one. It was Jay Simpson.
Oh, there you go. Oh, ex-Orient. So not Christie. So Christie, mate, you're off the hook. It's fine as you are.
He's tried to do us a job, keeping him down.
Exactly,
It's just, but
because we always get points against Welling, don't we? Yeah.
God, don't remind me of that one. Definitely don't bring that up, because if Connor's listening, he'll have some nightmares about Welling last season on that away day. But
have an upset something. Yeah.
Yes. So, of course, talking about outgoings, we've had a few players coming into the team. Won't really go into them. I'll leave the all you need to know videos to cover those two, Marshall and Shawnee Barre. But take a look at some players who are already with the squad that are now coming back. Of course, we're seeing the return of a few injured players and the loanees as well. Tushawn Walters, Bivesh Gurung both come back in from loan, both featuring in recent games. Tushawn Walters having a very good game, at least in the first half from what I've been told, against Scunthorpe last night at the time of recording. And Solwanjal Smith, Rafe Brown both coming back into the squad in recent weeks as well. It's really good to see, especially those injured boys coming back. It's been very tough for them. Of course, I've spoken a little bit about it throughout the season, and even George has said it in his interviews. He's been chomping at the bit. He's so desperate to play games, and what people got to remember, this is his first professional contract, really, for as a full-time club, or a three-quarters club, however you want to, label Maidstone. But he signed a 2-year deal. He moved 4 hours away from home. Um, Everything in his life changed to come and play for Maidstone. And he came to Maidstone and hasn't been able to play at all. And I can't imagine going through that at all. Same for Rafe, it was really, really important for us at times last season with some of the performances he put in as well. Especially in this season, he could have provided a lot of key cover that we could have needed at the back at times, especially earlier on in the season. So I'm really happy to see both of them back. I hope they do manage to stay with us for next season. Obviously, Sol, with that 2-year deal, is contracted for next season already. But we'll have to see how that one goes for him. Rafe, not sure about his situation, but really happy to see him as well return to the team. And Nigel, sorry, Sean, we'll go to you first, just quickly, if you've got a pressing point. But
yeah, it's just it's linked from the outgoings and the incomings as well. Because Fred mentioned it on air last night about George McLennan, who we used to have, and he had mental health issues as well. And clearly, the two that have left us have clearly made it known that there's been pressures, and they've needed to get the football going. And certainly for Hady, at least, he needed some sort of a break, a change, etc. And you're quite right. We've all known about Sol and spoken about him quite a lot this season because obviously we get on well with the chap and have been able to speak to him fairly frequently. That's only been this season. You then have to look at Rafe and say it's all of last season, all of this season. He's had a good 18 months or so of this. Sol's had 6 to 9 months of this. So the mental health issues are there, they're real. Whatever you're doing, if your job is the one passion and love you have in life, it's football, then it's great. But there's so many people out there. You see the Southend reporters and fans over the last few weeks and months. Great news for them over the last 24 hours, getting all of that sorted. And not so great for us statistically. If we were thinking of if we could chop out 4 teams from the league, we might be able to stay up. But for the future and sanctity of football, that's obviously clearly unimportant, and we need to be relegated to make sure a pyramid and a structure and ownership of clubs is properly regulated and still exists. So my long-winded point summed up is a lot of mental health pressures on these players, and you're quite right with Sol having to make that move, Rafe being out for so long, Hady with his issues, all of those players in and out. It's it's good that it's something that's been spoken about just normally in society, and long may the talk continue, long may the issues not.
For sure. I mean, my entire dissertation at university was about the mental health struggles of footballers in England. I'm someone who's very keyed up on that. Very, very important. Speak about those things. And Nigel, when it comes to these players returning to the squad, obviously players who I think at times this season we definitely could have used, but looking forward now and their contribution potentially to this Maidstone team, how do you feel that the return of these players will benefit Maidstone? And what do you think the long-term future with these players could look like?
Yeah, it's hopefully they're like we've said with Sol and Rafe and some of the other players that are coming in. I mean, you can put Shonabare in that category as well. He obviously went through the youth set up at Derby County, or he got a deal in the youth set up at Derby County and played a number of games for him. It didn't really work out. He started the season at Chesham, but that didn't really work out for him. So he's going to be wanting to prove his point, and hopefully they can prove their point with Maidstone. I mean, it just sums that all up, doesn't it? The ifs, buts, and maybes. If they'd have been available for the whole season, we'd probably be in a different situation to what we are now. I mean, Bill said it in his programme notes last night that if we'd have got something out of the Eastleigh game and we'd have got something out of the Gateshead game, we'd be probably 6, 7 points better off. And as bad as the season's been up to this point, we could be up sort of approaching 30 points and we'd be right in the mix. And that's after just a 3-game run. So it's just frustrating. It's just you know, I'm just hoping, going on your point, that they will grasp this chance. You know, whether they get another contract at Maidstone for next season, or they remain in the National League, or they get a club higher up the pyramid. You know, it's a chance for them to prove their point, isn't it? And maybe put in a few good performances, um, and hopefully that can be a benefit to Maidstone as well. You know.
Yeah, for me, I really echo that. Obviously, we've seen some players in the past for Maidstone leave and go on to greener pastures. Of course, myself and Sean, just before this game, are actually talking about Michi Efferty, who used to play for Maidstone, just featured in a game for Grimsby tonight in the FA Cup where they've beaten Southampton. And, you know, I am very happy to see Maidstone players move on, as long as Maidstone benefit from it as well. Let me make that clear. As long as we can get some sort of deal from it, I'm happy to see players come in, do well for the club, move on to pastures greener, because that is what I think the foundation of the club should be built around. I do champion that, and that has done us really well in the past. Although it has been a few years since that sort of thing has happened here, so it'd be nice to see something like that happen again. And yeah, I mean that's going to pretty much wrap up our incomings section of the show. And one thing that we always do at the end of podcasts, of course, we do the player of the month for Maidstone. So I'll kick this one off. Usually the most controversial of the three, and for me this month I'm going to go with Shamar Lawson. I think at the start of the month he was absolutely fantastic. Again, a couple of grins from the boys there. That's either them completely agreeing with me or completely disagreeing. We'll find out in a second. Again, we don't tell each other what we pick, so that always adds to the show a little bit. But for me, against Yeovil, sensational. Eastleigh, sensational. Fantastic couple of games there. And for me, no one's really hit the heights that he has in this month. I think I probably would have gone with maybe George Fowler if it wasn't for the own goal that he did get against, who was it? Oh God, Gateshead, caught on the spot there the other day. I think that did kind of cost us a result. As much as I love George, we could have probably picked up 3 points in that one. But yeah, for me, Shamar, I mean, he's such a fantastic player. We've seen it from a couple of our loanees this season, Galvin included. Yeah, I love having him in the team. Love seeing him play for the Stones. And if there was any way possible we could somehow get him back for next season, what a miracle that would be. I think he'd be a great asset to this team. But Nigel, on to yourself. Who is your player of the month for February?
Well, for those that saw the last month's January's podcast, I did go for Shamar Lawson then. I mean, it was a bit of a stab in the dark as an alternative at that point, but I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I think he's really kicked on. Yeah,
Come on, controversy.
but he has, hasn't he? He's
He
really
has.
kicked on this month, and he's been such an influential player. I mean, we said it on commentary at the Eastleigh game. He got that first goal at Eastleigh. Good strike as well.
Fantastic.
He was playing. He was just everywhere. He just covered it. So he scored the first goal. 5 minutes later, he's back on his own in his own box defending. The play, and I think he actually won us a corner in that bit of play, or a goal kick in that sort of passage of play. Or it's just all what you want from a midfield player, isn't it? He's composure on the ball. He can pick a pass, and it's not just the short passes. He can spread it, and he just gets us moving up the field. And I think he's as well. He's forming quite a good. He's good for Booty as that dynamic in that midfield. I think he brings the best out of Booty as well. Two players of similar sort of ability wise going forward on the ball and comfortable on the ball. But whereas Booty, he's been with us for more or less 2 seasons now, and he's slightly older than Lawson, but you wouldn't know it. In the way they play, he just come in and he's fitted into the team so well. He's obvious from the training videos that the club's been putting out recently that he's very much at the heart of all the fun and games in training, and the part of the banter. So yeah, that's all part of it, isn't it? It's the fact that he's come to the fore as well under George being manager, and I think there's sort of links there to Ryan Gordon, the university that
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he teaches at, the same as Alakambi. Is that right? It'd be a Alakambi, yeah.
Ibia can be. That's the one.
It'd be a Canby, that's the one. And Sadio Khan, they both
Mm.
sort of come out of that school of talent there, and yeah, you can see, talking about players that are going to kick on. You can really see him going back to Millwall and getting a move into League Two, or a lower end League One team next season. So obviously, I hope that's not the case, and I hope that he does. By some hook or by crook, we can get him to be a Stones regular. But I'm sure if that did happen, he'd be a real fan's favourite. But it's just good to see these players that come in like that and benefit from their time on loan at Maidstone, and it can only bode well for the future, because clubs of that ilk of Millwall and Charlton and them sort of big South East London clubs are more likely to send their talent to us in the future, knowing that we can develop them and get them Football League ready. So yeah, it's player of the month for me is Shamal Lawson.
Well, Sean, you've got an opportunity here to complete a hat trick, the first of the season, I think it would be, in terms of us all agreeing on a player of the month. So I think in typical fashion, you're probably going to dig us with some controversial jab, but who's your player of the month for February?
I mean, you guys have summed it up fairly well there, because Lawson has been highly rated and involved in most matches, most of the training exercises. Fowler also has been very good. Probably crown slipped a little bit with the own goal against Gateshead. Tried to make up for it, of course, come exceptionally close in that Gateshead match as well. But there's always the but. Someone else who's also been crucial in games, very active and scoring, and very much involved. I'd probably say even more so than Lawson, Nigel, in the banter, in the training videos, would have to be the one and only Jerome Craig Binham Williams, to give him his full name. Thanks, Wikipedia. Yeah, the last minute equaliser at Yeovil, the icing on the cake at Eastleigh, giving it what for to the Eastleigh
That was
fans.
brilliant. That was brilliant.
A couple of moments of absolute class. The hope you got at Yeovil, the icing on the cake at Eastleigh, and then of course he's gone off injured in the Gateshead match with half hour to go, and we've had to have Deshaun Walters and Rafe Brown fill in for him, both players in the match last night home to Scunthorpe. So leader off the pitch, leader on the pitch for me, without Jerome there on the pitch for both games at home for Gateshead and Scunthorpe. It's just the potential there. If we'd have had him, had some moments down those left-hand sides, some better distribution second half from that left-back area, possibly could well have seen Maidstone collect more than the 2 points that we had, and certainly he contributed to the cup run that we've had so far, with, dare I say it again, his involvement in the liquid football. But I was always picking Jerome before we'd even discussed it. I brought up his profile to make sure to remind myself. But also, as soon as you mentioned the banter side of things, Nigel, I thought, there's no one better in training than Jerome. I'm sorry. Sham clearly has been having some fun, but he's learning from the pro that is Jerome. So if you're watching, sir, keep up the good work and get back to full fitness very soon, please.
Indeed. I mean, a very worthy pick there. Jerome Binham Williams, clearly a fan favourite. One of my favourite players last season. Love him to bits. He's not always felt at home at his previous clubs. That's something that's been made very evident before he joined us. And I'm so glad to see him doing so well here, despite, of course, Maidstone's form doesn't really reflect his individual performances. He is the standing club captain for now, whilst Gavin Hoyt is injured. So, yeah, I mean, a very, very worthy choice there in Jerome Binham Williams for sure. So, on to the final segment of this podcast now. And of course, we do a cheeky little preview of the upcoming month for the Stones. And of course, it is March in the calendar coming up next, and it is not too prosperous looking of a month on paper, at least. I know myself and the boys have some different opinions on this upcoming month, but I suppose if February was the month we were supposed to pick up all the points, March is probably the one where I've got probably the least expectation, maybe April, but it's a tough battle for the Stones coming up. So on the 4th of March, this coming Saturday, we have Solihull Moors on the road. On the Tuesday after that, the 7th of March, we have Wealdstone away. And then we have Barnet at home the following Saturday in the FA Trophy quarter-final. Then we're away on the road against Maidenhead, 18th of March, 25th of March at home to Woking, and then we're finishing off the month at home against Bromley on the 28th of March. That is a 7:45 kickoff on what I assume is the Tuesday night. So many a team there who feature in the upper echelons of the table, and others slightly more convincing teams in that mid to push in playoff region. For me, I'm not really expecting a great deal from this month. I would probably be delighted with 3 points if we can get it somewhere. But yeah, it's going to be a tough month on paper at least. But I know, Sean, you've got a slightly different feeling, perhaps maybe not the most convincing argument in the world as to why we might do quite well this month, but an interesting take nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the positions of those sides we've got, Solihull, they're mid-table, Wealdstone as well, Maidenhead mid-table, I think they're 12th, 13th, 14th. And then you've got the likes of Woking and Bromley to come at the end of the month at the Gallagher. Woking, making third place their own for that crucial semi-final for the playoffs. Bromley sat just outside that zone. It's those three where we get to play in a row with the FA Trophy game in the middle. Just those mid-table sides that realistically are thinking they're going to need quite the miracle to get in the playoffs, but should also be safe. Unless they go on absolutely dreadful runs, and then you think we're never going to get anything again the rest of the season. I mean, Maidenhead's form, they've won the last three in a row in the league. Solihull haven't won in at least their last five. They've got 3 draws, 2 losses. Wealdstone have only got 1 win in 5. They got absolute hammering by Halifax, who before last night had 10 goals less than everybody else scored in the division. So if your defence is going to the most shot-shy coconut stand in town, then clearly you're going to have some issues. So, yeah, and coupled with that, we have an absolutely awful record against Solihull. We had a brilliant record against York, never lost to them, and got absolutely shafted there. So why not the flip side of it when we go to Solihull? Wealdstone, back end of London on a Tuesday night. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Again, they've just had their kick in. For me, it's got to be the Barnet game. Nigel and Fred will be covering that for us because Nigel, I believe, since COVID, you have covered every single FA Trophy game for us on Stones Live. So why break the habit of a lifetime? And you've never lost in 90 minutes either. So,
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
for anybody who's counting, me, because it's my job. That's the one, the be all and end all. If we can have some form going into the cup game, great. We've seen with Eastleigh that we had the Yeovil draw, but because of the nature of it, that gave us a bit of a boost into the Eastleigh game, having come off the back of a few away games in January, not getting too many positive results. So, yeah, it could be the flip side. Could be the league form starts to pick up, and then we could get absolutely mullered by Barnet. But again, Barnet's form absolutely atrocious as well. Obviously, I know, Joe, you're a big fan of the Harry Smith, as we discuss frequently. He might have scored a lot of goals, but clearly he's been doing them absolutely pointless matches. They're still 4th. They've lost 4 of their last 5 as well, and they're still sat there comfortably in 4th. But I mean, there's a lot of sides in the playoffs that could easily slip out that just aren't winning. Chesterfield, a fine example as well, also have no wins in 5. So clearly we caught Eastleigh at the right time. So yeah, there's a lot of potential still this month. However downbeat we've been about February, and rightly so. When you consider 10, 11 defeats in a row in the league, and then only the 3 points. Two of which coming. See some people being sarcastic. Oh, we've not lost in the last two, and you go, well, if we can get
We
that run
haven't.
going, exactly. If we can get that run going through the middle of March, if we could, if it's 2 points away at Solihull and Wilston, if that somehow becomes four and the likes of Dorking and York are still dropping so fast that there is a chance for us to close that gap to 5, 6 points near the end of March, you are then wondering if they're going to still keep losing their matches. Is there a win against Chesterfield in there? They might be struggling to stay in the playoffs around that sort of time. Notts County with the title jitters come April. All these matches we've been fearful of, by the time you get to them, then you've got absolutely nothing to lose. These players playing for contracts here or elsewhere, then not going to be deliriously optimistic. I'm sure, as we've said earlier in the show, we could lose most of these matches the rest of the season. And the most important thing is a kick on for the cup. But who knows? Let's go to Solihull at the start of March. Let's not lose 5-0 yet again. Wouldn't that be nice, boys and girls?
It would. It would be indeed very nice. And Nigel, I know you share a very similar sentiment. I'm not sure how, factual that is on your behalf, or whether you're just kind of putting that on a little bit just to wind me up and go against my disappointing outlook on March. But how are you feeling about the coming month?
Yeah, it might be that I turned out being as mad as the March Hare, but I just
Did it
think,
for Eastleigh in the cup.
yeah, but I mean, look, going into the game on just as a one-off game, I think that's how you've got to look at the season now. We've got call it what you like, 11 cup finals, 11 pre-season games, competitive games. Players are going to be playing for a contract, like Sean said, whether it's here or whether it's at another club. Um, and the history of the season so far has proved that when there's no pressure on us, when we're not expected to win games, we perform well in those games. I mean, you can just look back even since the beginning of January when George has come in, Wrexham, look how well we performed in that game. They didn't expect us to come back, and but for that last minute goal that we'd have got a point from that game. Even the Eastleigh game at home, and Lee Bradbury said in his interview afterwards, that was one of the toughest games they've had because we're battling. There's no pressure on us. Teams that have got something to play for, sort of pushing into that playoff places. If we can go ahead, goal in front of them, that automatically that pressure will ramp up because they'll be coming to Maidstone or playing against Maidstone, thinking 3 points guaranteed here. We can really kick on and keep on the coattails of the teams above us. But the longer the game goes on, it's your old cup final, cup game cliche, isn't it? Stay in the game long enough and maybe get a smash and grab, whatever. You just don't know the luck. We said about the bad luck that comes our way. Law of averages said it's got to change sometime. Against the teams like Solihull that we notoriously do bad against. Law of averages says it's got to change sometime, hasn't it? And going into the game, we're above them in the form table. Albeit on goal difference, but that is a big thing. As bad as our goal difference has been up to this point, whatever we have that our failings have been, George has got us a lot more solid into. We haven't conceded that many in the last few games, so and we are scoring goals as well. There's not been many 0-0s or shutout, even when we're losing games where we're getting the odd goal. So there's reason to be optimistic there, and it is going to be the month is going to all be built around that Barnet game, isn't it? That trophy, I think that's sort of like if we can just keep it going into that April period. If you get to a semi-final, it is a one-off game. It's going to be all the teams in that left in the trophy, the National League teams are all teams that are. If Barnet go out of it, then you've got all the shot Gateshead, York, all teams that are in the same position as us. So, and we've been to we've been to games like Notts County, we put them out. Worthing was a potential banana skin as well. The first game we had, Eastleigh were pushing the playoffs. So we haven't done it. We haven't had it easy. It's not as if we've got like a bum outsider ranked team. Dog and Duck FC. We've played some big proper teams away from home as well. So maybe, just maybe, it's that name on the cup. And this is going to be our year. So, and incidentally, you're saying about we've never been closer to Wembley. Of course, we're playing the team that are the closest to Wembley. Barnet. You can sit in their stand and see the Archers. So, it's tentatively close for them throughout their existence every season. So, but going on their form as well, obviously the only way they're going to get promoted is to go through Wembley, and that they have not got a good track record of going to Wembley. So, a lot of their fans are sort of saying, well, we've never been to Wembley before. What's the chances of doing it two in 1 year? It's not very likely. So if we're going to get there, we go up through the football the playoffs. So they're going to have one eye on that, and hopefully we can capitalise on that.
Yeah, I think March is definitely going to be a month where it's going to be one of those, it's not over till the fat lady sings periods, I think, because as you say, we're going to want to go into the Barnet game with a little bit about us, which again may give us that confidence to turn up a little bit more against the likes of Solihull or Wealdstone, as you both said, not in great form at the moment. The opportunities are there. Of course, you look at these teams on paper and you think not a chance, or at least most people will. But if you do look into it a little bit more, you kind of unveil your tinfoil hat a tiny little bit and you kind of look and go, maybe, just maybe, there is something to be uncovered in March. It could be a bit of a diamond in the rough month for this season. So, of course, do stay tuned on the channel for any potential videos we'll be bringing you in March. I'm sure if we be Barnet, I'll probably put some sort of video up of me going a bit mental someplace, celebrating that one. But if all else fails, we will be back come the end of March for another edition of the Off Ed podcast. So, Sean, Nigel, thank you both very, very much for joining me today. It's been a lovely, lovely time talking to both of you.
Pleasure.
Yep. Good night.
And of course, everybody else who has tuned in and has made it this far in the video, thank you ever so much. If you're not already, please do subscribe to the JP on Comms YouTube channel. Do leave the video a like. It boosts my self-esteem, and I'm sure it does something to Sean and Nigel as well, which I don't really want to know about. But of course, do join us again in a month's time for the next episode of this podcast. We will be back come the end of March to talk everything Stones. So again, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.